Hello, everybody. Welcome to something that's quite interesting and quite new
Welcome to something.
in a variety of ways. Yeah, so we have sort of a dual episode here. We have Krystal, Kyle, and friends, and we have the realignment. We have Marshall, Saagar, Krystal, and of course me, Kyle Klinsky.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, let's just get right to it. The big news dropped. Krystal and Saagar, you guys are no longer with The Hill. I don't think anybody saw this coming. I think because the show's going strong, the numbers are phenomenal, but all of a sudden now. So tell everybody, why'd you leave The Hill?
What do you think, Krystal? Why did we leave The Hill?
I mean, honestly, the reason is really simple. And first of all, I have to say, we had an amazing experience at The Hill. Rising was, the work of a lifetime to get to create that show and what we got to do every day and the interaction with the audience. All of that was absolutely amazing. But at bottom, we wanted to live our values. We talk all the time about how much we believe in the new media ecosystem, how much we believe in independent media free of any sort of corporate influence. And so even though I have to admit, I'm really nervous and it feels very uncomfortable, but in a good way, we wanted to step out and go independent and do a show of our own.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing with Rising. We loved it. It's amazing that they let us get away with as much as we got away with for 2 years.
True.
At the end of the day, though, I wanted to do a better show. And the way that The Hill works, the business model and all of that, it's just not engineered to our best strengths, which is that The Hill is about volume because it's all just clicks, right? And what we wanted to do is we see the rise of subscription media. We see exactly how independent media can work with a dedicated audience. And what do we really love doing, Krystal? It's not just chasing clicks or having to cover something for the sake of simply filling a show, right? We want to cover whatever we think is important. Sometimes that's the housing market, sometimes UFOs, Epstein, Bill Gates. I'm not going to lie. Of course, that stuff does really well. One of my favorite radars I ever did at Rising was about semiconductors. And I think it got 85,000 views. And if that had been all I wanted to do, or maybe there was a week where I thought that was really important, that just would not have been financially sustainable there. But in the new media ecosystem, it is. Whatever we think is important is financially sustainable in a subscription-based model. And so at the end of the day, just the way that things were diverging and you could see the rise of new media, we could see that we could have total editorial control. We could be our own bosses, not have to chase, in my opinion, a dying, defunct, and not as good model for us or for the audience. It was a total no-brainer.
When the one thing is I want to pick up, Kyle, you were pointing out that no one saw this coming. Actually, there was a intense group of people on Reddit.
Oh, that's true.
Thread
right?
after thread.
Those guys nailed it.
They've had these guests on. They're traveling. What's going on? So let's just talk about the audience itself, because that's the part as a panelist that's always just shocked me. People who are this interested in this message, what about this audience is going to work so well with this new format?
Yeah, I think they're already predisposed to it, right? They already subscribe necessarily to Glenn Greenwald or Matt Taibbi or Joe Rogan. They see
Fascists.
Tim Dillon. Yes, correct. Yes, I forgot it. Yeah, Russiagate. Basically, what I'm saying is that
all paid by Russia.
Our actual audience are just the KGB. The key to understand, I think, for all of these people is that when this is what the corporate suits never understood. People weren't coming to it because it said The Hill on the top. They were coming because they trusted us. And that is the thing, that's the keystone of the entire new media ecosystem, is that they trust us after spending, 2 years every single day in our living room or on their phone when they're driving. You shouldn't do that, but I understand if you do. If, at your desk and your job and you've just got your phone sitting there, you build a connection with someone over a long enough period of time that we knew, or at least we hope, that they are going to come with us.
So one of the things that I would say that's been really heartening for us in the Biden era, and Rising lasted with Saagar and I, it was almost exactly 2 years.
Yeah, to the day.
And even, which is kind of a short period of time in the grand scheme of things, but during that short period, the show went through a number of evolutions. At the beginning, it was really super just day-to-day politics heavy, Democratic primaries kicking off, what's going on with the Republicans and Trump and who's going to be the best, all that stuff. Our first big interview that popped was with Andrew Yang.
Huge.
And so talking about the candidates that weren't getting attention from the legacy media, that was sort of the first phase of the show. And then once coronavirus hit, there was a big adjustment that had to take place because suddenly political news just wasn't top of mind for people in the same way. And so we had to adjust to meet that. And then the Biden era, and this is the part that I've actually found really heartening, is of course we still cover the day-to-day of politics and what's going on with the infrastructure package and reconciliation and what the hell happened to the public option, by the way, and where's $15 minimum wage, and how about we get some support for the PRO Act. But some of the things that we've done in this era that we've gotten the biggest response to and that the audience has seemed to find the most meaningful are talking about the massive shifts that we're all living through right now, post-Trump, post-pandemic, living in, the wreckage of like the neoliberal system. So when we've talked about housing, that's gotten a huge response. When we talk about the way that billionaires just like robbed everybody blind during the pandemic, that's gotten a huge response. When we've talked about the way that people are rethinking their relationship to the workplace, that's gotten a huge response. So part of what we really want to bring into the new show, and then we should talk about specifically what we're doing, part of what we want to bring into the new show is diving deeper into those issues, which maybe aren't specifically like left, right, Democrat, Republican kind of conversations. And that's the part where I think also there's an overlap with why the subscription model works really well for that, because what we're seeing from the audience is a desire to go deeper on those topics, but that's not necessarily like the clickiest headlines that you can put on the things to ride the Google trends of that day.
So do me a favor and tell everybody about the mechanics of this new show.
Okay, so it's actually, it can
Tell the
sound
name
complicated. First of all, okay, let's unveil it. Let's unveil it. Breaking points. Let's put this up there. Can we put this on camera 1? All right, there we go. And we'll unveil the logo. There we go. So look, it's Breaking Points with Krystal and Saagar.
It's a cool logo, right,
It's
guys?
a very, very cool logo. We spent a lot of time on that logo, so I hope that everybody appreciates it. It's going to be on YouTube, and if you want to consume the show for free, your viewer experience is not going to change that much. It's still going to post as clips. It will also, how many thousands of fan messages have we gotten, will be available for free as a podcast with breaks, just kind of like the audio version of watching something with on YouTube with breaks as well. But if you pay $10 a month then, at krystalandsaagar.com, then you actually get, in my opinion, a much superior viewing experience, which is that you get the full show, uncut, emailed to you every day, an hour before that it posts on YouTube. It'll be an unlisted YouTube link. You can still Chromecast it to your TV, watch it on your phone. I don't want to screw up anybody's normal viewing patterns. I know exactly how it goes. And same thing with the podcast. It'll be full, the exact audio, full-length version of the podcast, no ad breaks, anything like that. So if you're free, you still have to watch YouTube ads, or you have to listen to Krystal and I ask you to subscribe so that you don't have to listen to us anymore. But other than that, that's the key part. And look, I just want to make it clear, like, the reason that we have to do this and the reason that we're committed to do this is what did I explain in the beginning? We have to make sure that the economics align with making sure that we can keep people informed the way that we want them to, and we can bring them the news that they want. Like the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC, these people have gajillions of dollars. They can literally take a loss on their worst products for years and years and years just in order to make sure that whatever business unit or whatever is going to support their overall mission. We do not have that luxury. Like, we are putting our fate fully in the hands of our audience and saying, look, we need you in order to help us if we want to compete against these people, because I think we both passionately feel, given our backgrounds, that partisan media, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, is destroying this country very slowly and has been for a long time. And the culmination of that was a lot of what happened in 2020, and we want some sort of corrective to it. So I believe very strongly that this is the best way to get out of it.
You got a couple quick things that should be hit. So you're using Supercast.
Yes.
And you're doing Rising. How is the Q&A going to work? How is the actual mechanics of what you're doing?
So Supercast actually is an awesome Q&A platform where people can type in their questions, and then other people who are premium members can upvote and downvote like what the best questions are. So we're going to do that once a week for the people who subscribe. But I think, look, if I had one message, it's twofold. It's like, help support us, and in exchange, we are going to give you the best viewership and listenership experience possible. You will always be our absolute priority whenever it comes to content.
One of the things we want to carry over from Rising that we sort of stumbled upon as an important innovation, I wish I could like take credit for it, but honestly, it just happened this way, is people really appreciated that it had high production value. Because it had that sort of mainstream feel with the graphics production and with the set and the whole look and feel. And even Saagar and I are both sort of like, you know, we have a traditional like broadcast anchor vibe that we both bring from our journalism background. Saagar is always wearing a tie and whatever. So, you know, that was not really an intentional choice. That was what The Hill wanted to do to start with. But what we found out is that people really, really liked that. And the reason that they liked it is because then they could send our clips to friends, loved ones, neighbors, etc., as like a sort of like pipeline into a different way of thinking about politics. And the fact that we have all those pieces in place to trigger in your brain like mainstream, trusted, like these are people who you should take seriously. This is maybe the most consistent feedback that we get over and 100%. Over again, is that that's been important for people to be able to send our content to others in their circle who maybe aren't YouTube people, aren't alternative media people, but to help them understand what their type of politics are. And one of the things I'm really proud of is we've also gotten a lot of feedback that has sparked a lot of conversation between people who are maybe politically radically at odds, but are able to have a sort of like shared language and shared ability to relate to this content. And that's started conversations that weren't happening again. We're going to bring that ethos over to Breaking Point.
My favorite fan interactions are, I don't agree with you at all, but...
we get a lot of that.
Yeah, I don't agree with you at all, but... And I'm like, okay. But... I love how you look mainstream, but you don't sound mainstream. Or you helped me explain my politics to my dad. Or you helped me explain my politics to my grandma. And my grandma won't watch a video of somebody, you know, random person on YouTube, but because your show looks professional, they sat and they listened. 6 minutes. It's not a big commitment that somebody has to give. And we should be clear here. This is the Krystal Kyle set. It's an awesome set. We have a new set, which we will be unveiling to the first 1,000 people who subscribe at KrystalAndSaagar.com. It's amazing. We spent a lot of time the design, making sure that it's going to remain it's going to remain like a very mainstream looking thing. I got to design a desk, which was something. You can ask Krystal what that sketch was like. It looked like a 4-year-old drew it. And when I sent it over to the manufacturer, he's like, "You sure about this?"
Didn't you say something? You're like, "This is the worst drawing
he's like,
I've
"This
ever
is
seen."
literally the worst drawing I've ever seen." And I was like, "Well, can you build it?"
But it turned out beautifully. So.
It all worked out.
So there's a million questions I want to ask, but let's just start with something that's rather basic. Are you scared that the YouTube algorithm is not going to treat you as kindly as it has when you were with The Hill? I mean, you were under the wing of a corporation.
Yeah.
And when you look at Secular Talk versus The Hill, I could put a very similar title to a title you have on The Hill's channel. You guys could get 300,000 views on it like that, and I'm stuck at 65,000. You know, you guys said it. I didn't say it. You said it, that one of the reasons why you think you were successful is that early on you brought on people like me, and my audience saw you guys, and then all of a sudden you guys lapped me by a mile and a half. So that's weird. Yeah. So are you afraid that, you know, the YouTube algorithm is going to suppress you?
Well, that's why we're not relying on YouTube ads, right? Like, I would say, what if this was 2014 or something, 2013, we'd be like, oh, hell yeah. Like, we wouldn't even had an idea. Right, yeah.
Facebook Watch. All over Facebook
like,
Watch.
Yeah, guys, share us on Facebook and their new awesome Facebook Watch. And then it turned out their views are total bullshit. But that's why we're going subscription. Like, this is the ethos of it, which is what I said. We don't want to have to chase clicks. We don't even have to rely upon an algorithm. Now, like, do I want our stuff to go viral and new people to find it? Yeah. But that is not the ethos, like, of the business model. And it's not like we're using the views necessarily to go out and, like, sell independently to advertisers and saying, hey, you know, sponsor us so we can directly read this product or whatever into our feed. Like, we're relying on our people in order to back us. And if you have enough, as you found out, Kyle, you can be suppressed, but suppressed 65,000. That's still a lot of people.
Well, yeah,
Like, that's
in
a lot
fact,
of people.
let me just tell a little story, which it gets to what you're talking about. I don't think you guys were around on YouTube when the original Adpocalypse hit.
No.
Now,
No, we were not.
The
Yeah.
gist
I
of
think that was 2017, something like that.
around there.
right.
But the gist of Adpocalypse was there was like some mainstream ad, like a Nestle ad, that sort of slipped through the cracks and got on a legit white supremacist channel.
Right.
And so then every mainstream media network kicked into gear. They wrote fear-mongering articles, and the response from YouTube was defund all of news and politics like that.
Yep.
So I went from making decent money to making $0.00 overnight. It was terrifying. There were thoughts in my mind of I might not be able to do it. I mean, I had a fucking audience of however many hundreds of thousands of people. I was like, I might not be able to do this. So what happened? I ended up starting a Patreon that night, telling my audience, and like that, we made $13,000 a
There
month.
you go.
So we were able to make up the gap. So it was
Exactly.
the fact that the audience liked the product, and all you need is some small dollar donations, and then you could do whatever you want. Like you said, you could give them the product, and you can guarantee the quality that you know you can do, and that's what they're tuning in for. So I mean,
Power
they
of the
really
people,
saved
man.
me, and the fact that you guys are leaving from under the wing of a corporation. That also speaks to integrity in the sense that you're like, I don't want to be with the corporation anymore.
No, we really didn't.
I mean, this just speaks to something that fascinates, because we're talking about 2014, 2017, and during that period, I mean, Krystal, you know this, there were so many like big corporations like, hey, we need to talk to millennials. We need to make politics cool. MSNBC is doing this with Nicole Wallace now. So at a meta level, what is it that made this actually work? I told this to you a year ago, but I was like, dude, like you guys are actually doing what like Mike and HuffPost and Vox actually said they were trying to do, but without, let's just say, the less successful editorial message.
We thought about this a lot, which is that people threw about $1 billion at what we actually did. People threw $1 billion at Mike and many other,
Vice.
a lot of venture money at CNN for millennials, right? But here was the truth. What they wanted was the Suits version of CNN for millennials. They didn't actually want what millennials wanted from their version of CNN, which is you got to call out a lot of people.
Yeah.
You got to call out people actually in power. Oh, and those people in power, they buy ads on Vice. Or those people, they're owned by the corporation, which is doing a deal with Vice. Or HBO has a deal with Vice, which means you can't criticize Time Warner, who is their parent corporation. You guys get it. And so what they actually wanted was real independence, being able to call out everybody on both sides. People who are our age, I mean, I'm 29, and according to our analytics, most of the people are around like my age, a little like 10 years up, 10 years minus. Those people are like not like doctrinaire Republicans or Democrats. They're not like boomers who like everything they want from Fox News or MSNBC is how the other side is bad. Their brain has not been like conditioned to that point. So we actually speak to the politics that they wanted. It's just that our version of politics, the Suits don't love that.
Well,
like
that's
that doesn't
exactly
fit
right.
into Washington.
Wait, there were lots of hilarious experiments with like, we're going to have a millennial correspondent who was some like, Pete Buttigieg type with the exact same politics.
Better haircut.
Yeah, the exact
That's not hard to get a better haircut than him.
the exact same politics as like whatever the mainline establishment, corporate line was, only in a younger person. And so, yeah, I mean, that just feels, and also just packaging it as like, this is for millennials. We're going to do a segment on millennials
Hello,
now.
fellow kids.
Right,
Hello,
exactly.
fellow
It has that
children.
energy for sure.
Tell us the biggest stories on Rising that blew up.
The first one was Andrew Yang. I'll be honest, and Krystal was friends with Andrew Yang, and I was like, "Who is this guy, Krystal?" I was like, what's going on here?
Let's just try it.
And she was like, I was like, all right. And so he came on. This was way before he surged anything. He had his book, and I remember he actually signed that. I don't know where that went. I need to find that. He signed this book, and I remember talking to him and being like, man, this guy is not a crank. I was like, this guy is really smart.
And this is, just to be clear, this is pre-Israel war crimes are awesome. Andrew Yang.
Correct.
Yeah.
June
The
2019.
original incarnation.
I think this was not even June 2019. This might have been earlier, whenever I was a fill-in host. So this was April, maybe, something like that. I remember interviewing him and being like, this guy is really smart. It took 10 minutes. I asked him about the YouTube algorithm. We talked about trade with China. He was talking about automation, and I was blown away. But the show wasn't on YouTube at that time, so we didn't realize the response. What really hit was that very first interview that you and I did with Yang.
Right.
I think, how long was it? Maybe 20
We
minutes
went
or
20
something?
to 30 minutes with him.
And it was the first time anybody ever took him seriously. I was like, okay, tell me, you believe this about monopoly. Yang has some really interesting ideas around antitrust, monopoly, and all that. I actually still quote him every time I talk about the internet, which I got from that interview. Talking about trade with China, talking about tariffs, talking about like the way children and screen time. And I remember thinking, this is a very serious person. And right afterwards, I remember he thanked you. He just was like, thank you for taking me seriously.
Well, that was the part.
it.
That was in that interview. I mean, I wish I could remember how many views it actually got.
I
But it was
remember
the first thing.
175,000.
And we were like, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, we were
Wait, just to be
blown away by
clear,
that.
you were saying whoa when it hit like 5,000 is what you're
Of
saying.
course,
Yeah,
of
not
course.
175,000.
No,
but
point,
that was
look, when we
the
took
first
over,
thing.
Yeah.
When we took over
Yeah.
the Hill YouTube channel, it had 5,000.
Correct.
Subscribe.
5,000
And they weren't posting
subscribers.
any content.
Yeah.
So Rising was really starting from, and so our first stuff would get, 100 views. We'd
Right.
be like, whoa, we broke 100 views. This is awesome. So when Yang starts racking up thousands of views, the part of it that was obviously like just having something that hit was really exciting.
Yeah.
But the part of it that was actually the most thrilling was at that point we would read the comments, and we would read like all of the comments.
And I would respond to some.
And
Yeah.
they were
Rookie
all like
stuff.
just so grateful that we asked real questions.
That's it.
Because and it wasn't a softball interview.
No.
I mean, you pushed them on some, I pushed them on some things. There, we were getting into the policy nitty
Press them on
gritty.
China, if I remember.
And they were just so happy that we had asked real and substantive questions. That to me, coming from the cable news world where it's on in the background, people are barely paying attention, it's all fluff, it's all just like stupid partisan talking point warfare. The fact that there was an audience that was like yes to depth was actually totally thrilling to me and very much informed the way that we move the channel forward. So that was the first big thing.
Real quick, biggest radar and biggest radar.
Oh, God,
I
I don't
think-
remember.
I think I know what yours is.
There are two.
I know what yours
I
is.
think mine is the one that I did recently
Bill Gates.
about Bill
GameStop.
Gates.
You took down
and
Bill Gates.
It was about how he has single-handedly done more to, carry water for big pharma in the specific context of like fighting against lifting IP protection on the coronavirus vaccine. And he's got a long history here behind the scenes of this guy's a monopolist himself.
Yeah.
So he has an ideological
And a sex pest.
an ideological position with regards to patent protection that has been overwhelmingly influential in guiding global public health. That was probably my biggest. Another one that would be close in the running was Ryan Grimm got his hands on some leaked audio from a Biden call
Yes,
early
That's
in his
right.
administration.
Yeah, you got over 2 million on that.
with
Yelling
civil-
at
with-
civil rights
with
leaders.
civil rights
Yes,
leaders.
yeah.
And no one covered, and that's a common theme is the things that do the best are things that are really important and no one's talking about. So that was another thing. This came out, mainstream media had access to it, didn't cover it hardly at all. And he admitted all sorts of, there's a totally contemptuous attitude, totally off-putting, like scolding attitude, and also basically admitted, like, I know you want me to do all these things with executive orders, and I'm not gonna.
Yeah. I remember
Mine
that.
was Epstein. Not a surprise. But it's funny, though, because it's the same core thing, which is that nobody was covering it, and it was a legitimate story. And at the time, what had happened was the Department of Financial Services, I believe, in New York State, had fined Deutsche Bank like a lot of money for their dealings with Epstein. This is all public record. It was, out there. And I just read the report and I was like, this is crazy. They're outlining some financial transactions and they solicited him. This is all, sworn.
That was what was crazy to me is they solicited him.
Yeah, they were like, we need Epstein, like
As
as a
our
client,
client.
in 2013, like
Oh,
after
damn.
he'd been convicted. And I was like, this is nuts. They have their email, they have Deutsche Bank emails talking about soliciting him. They talk about how he was a good conduit to other wealthy people. They talk about
So
how
gross.
his associates would routinely ask how much they could withdraw in cash without triggering a federal alert system, which, according to federal law and bank regulation, they were supposed to report it the moment you asked that question. If you or I walked into our bank
Yeah.
and I was like, hey, how much cash can I withdraw? Even though it's technically $9,999.
How much? Say that one more time.
$9,999.
Leave for my drug deals.
If I ask that, they should call the FBI immediately. And I mean, probably, right? That's sketchy behavior. They didn't do that. He did that twice a week, every week for like years. Withdrew like $1 million in cash. He was wiring all this
They just
money
look the
for
other way.
suspected human trafficking rings
Yep.
in Eastern Europe. And I'm like, this is insane. You turn on the TV, nothing. No CNN, no Fox News, no MSNBC, zero. Like, it's like The Sun in the UK and me. And I think that was a common theme of a lot of our coverage over the years, which is that we would pick the stories which the mainstream media just didn't want to cover. Amy Robach admitting on camera that she let the Prince Andrew story go because the royal family pressured
that.
They
ABC
wanted
News.
a royal family interview.
How many
So
people?
gross.
I think CNN did one web piece about it, one, like in their newsletter or whatever. Everybody else didn't touch it. Why? Because ABC is owned by Disney, and Disney is a huge player.
And he's
in
got
the media
dirt on
space.
somebody.
Yeah, and that's the thing. At the end of like CBS probably has the same story. They fired the girl
Yep.
who they suspected of leaking the video. The poor like 26-year-old, even though she was working at a different corporation, CBS fired her. That showed me how crazy like the interconnectedness.
Yeah, they got her
of all
new
this was.
employer
Oh,
to fire
that
her.
pissed me
That's
off.
Well, the thing is, the story. So you've got your Epstein
Yeah,
beat, so
right.
that's obviously very important. But I think the story, looking forward with Breaking Points, the story that mattered the most in terms of the viability of this model of news for me was your GameStop
Yeah.
monologue.
That's
Because
true, actually.
this was a monologue where we did a couple of realignment
about
episodes
2
on
million.
it. We got so much incoming from people who aren't even into politics.
That's right.
Like that was like people like random banker friends we have were like, hey, like I feel
People I
this.
grew up with, people in high school too. I hadn't heard from in years.
And that's
Yeah.
and I think that shows the key to what news should be moving forward during the Biden era, because it has to be things that aren't just like, hey, like here's this poll of the week, here's this inside baseball that's happening in DC. Because with GameStop, it was like, hey, like everyone gets the sense that there's something the matter with the
Right.
system.
And it's like wrong, but I don't know why. And if I watch CNBC, I'm not going to understand
No.
why. If I watch, actually, you're going to get the opposite
argue for
story.
more
Yeah, they're
wrongness.
going to be
Yeah.
like, wrong. They'll be like, well, this is so unfair to these
Yeah.
hedge funds. It's
Exactly.
outrageous. And you would see the same thing in Bloomberg, or absent a few very great journalists at Bloomberg. But the key problem that, and the key that we saw after that is, I was like, we're going to be okay. Because what was happening is that CNN was plunging, right? Like at New York Times, everybody's subscriptions are down. Fox was screwed by November because they wouldn't go all in on Stop the Steal. MSNBC seems dead. Rising at that time, what was that, January? It wasn't going down, but it was like relatively flat. That was the first time something went mega viral in probably what, the most like dead political season of all time, right? Like I think
Post-inauguration.
Yeah, it was like post-inauguration, and the American Rescue Plan like wasn't quite there yet. Like we were moving into reconciliation, so it was like nothing was happening. The most important thing on TV was like a confirmation hearing, and we did that GameStop story, and it went mega viral. I mean, I still have people contact me about it. What's fascinating about that is I realized that, to Krystal's point, and why we called the show Breaking Point, is because there are breaking points all across American society which the media is not covering. In many cases, are actively trying to cover up or are complicit in the reason why those breaking points are emerging in the first place. And so that was when we started doing monologues on semiconductor. You did housing. Housing is actually still one of your second most popular
Yeah,
radars
that was
ever.
it.
Just
Yeah.
about like a Wall Street bid in order to become your landlord. People feel this viscerally. This happened to me. I got kicked out of my house. I had to go get one. You know, just sounded a lark. I'm like, oh, how much would it cost to buy? I'm like, what? I'm like, what is happening? This
Right.
is insane. We had that story of the fixer-upper house, which sold sight unseen, even though it was a dump. It sold for $400,000 or something.
Unlivable.
In
dump.
cash.
You could not even
You
live
couldn't
in
even
it.
live
Where
there.
was it?
Somebody paid
It
cash
was
here in DC.
in one of the
Wow.
suburbs right outside of DC.
All because people are so desperate.
One thing I wanted to add to that, though, which is, I think, a key part of why we wanted to move forward with Breaking Points, is as important as the stories that went mega viral were, some things like your semiconductor radar,
right.
or another thing that, that I'm really proud of, that I want to do more of on Breaking Points, is when we covered some of the labor struggles that were getting no attention.
Coal miners.
Early on, we interviewed coal miners who, do you guys remember the story? They literally, with their bodies, stopped a coal train from moving because they had been robbed of their paychecks. And they just they set up camp on the train tracks to stop this train until they got just the bare minimum of what's owed to them. There's another, actually, coal miner strike down in Alabama right now that we covered as well. And we've tried to, we focused in a lot on what was going on with Amazon down in Alabama, tried to warn people how much the odds were stacked. And so some of those things, they may not go mega viral, but I think in terms of understanding what's going on in our politics, what's going on in the country, what are we up against, and what are some of the movements of solidarity that could actually make progress outside of a like Democrat-Republican context. That's something that I've been really proud of at Rising that I think we can do even more of at breaking points, absent that imperative of like every segment must click.
Yes, exactly.
So let me ask you guys. Let me ask you actually a tough question.
Okay.
So the genesis of the show was populist left, populist right. Do you ever feel like because that was the framing of it that like you're sort of obligated to defend a right position and you're obligated to defend a left position even if you don't necessarily believe it or no?
Well, no, I never defended anything I didn't believe. I was reluctant to cover stuff that conflicted with what I believe. Does that make sense?
That does. Yes.
What have I
Like
always
what?
said on the
Like
show,
what?
guys?
Wait, come on, name it. Like,
Okay,
what was
Tucker. Who else?
Say that
like
a little
Trump.
louder, Saagar,
Yeah,
for-
is it Tucker? Yeah, so for all my haters out there.
So you didn't want to criticize him.
Yeah, wait, dude,
because
he's my boss. He hired me. Like, you know,
was your boss, to be clear.
Was my boss.
Yeah, was, not is.
Was my boss. The guy, he's the first person ever hired me in media.
'Cause it was
like,
Daily
come on,
Caller
I'm a
was?
loyal person. Yes,
It was a
I
Daily
was
Caller.
nobody. And Tucker, I mean, you know, is a guy from Crossfire. That's all I knew. He sat with me like 45 minutes. We shot the shit or whatever. Like, he's always been so incredibly nice to me, but he was doing things that really, really upset me. Now, I felt the true break happened for me after Trump started with Stop the Steal. And I was just like, I'm done. And it was the most liberating thing that ever happened. And because I was like, you know what? By doing this, I am no longer a member of the professional political right.
Right.
And I am okay with that.
Right.
Like, I am very okay with that.
You're better,
which is
honestly.
That,
That's
well, I
the
hope
thing.
so. And what I did was we struggled with this. We had to say, look, because we knew, I mean, there's a lot of MAGA people who watch the show too. And we were like, listen, guys, here's the lawsuits. Every single one. Every single one of them has been dismissed. This claim by Sidney Powell is total bullshit. Some people were not going to believe me. That I have totally made peace with that. And this was the beauty of the show, of the genesis from the beginning, which is that if you have a mixed audience of people from across the political spectrum, you can afford to take that risk. I know, and I'm not going to name names, there are people out there who had to go along with Stop the Steal because they knew that their audience was there, and they had no other choice. Their economics depended on it. They would be dead without
key thing. Question for all three of you, because I'm not in the subscription media game. Patreon for Krystal
And
Kyle
Substack.
and
Yeah,
Substack.
Krystal Kyle.
And Supercast. How are you guys going to be honest with your audience? Because now the business model is your most intense fans are going to subscribe. You get 3 to 10% of them. How are you going to hit that moment? Because some story is going to happen, which is going to push. And how do you? I just want to for the whole panel. How do y'all think about this?
Yeah. So it's interesting because you have to understand, I came up on YouTube, and so
Yeah, you were OG YouTube, right?
yes. So in my mind, the whole point from the very beginning, I never really felt like I was part of a team. I happened to kind of be part of a team early on because my ideology wasn't fully evolved, and I was a little bit of a Democratic partisan early on, and like I would play defense and then play offense. You know what I mean? So, but it's always been, I'm telling you exactly what I think, and the reward system, the mechanisms were in place where like that's the thing that would grow my audience.
Yes.
So the incentives aligned properly for me from the beginning. So I actually struggled when I look at other people who are not abiding by that dynamic, it didn't land for me. Like, what? So you're not saying everything that you think? So, but what's fascinating is this. It really is fucking rare. Like everybody sort of feels like I want to be part of the thing. And then you're, like you said, people who were defending Stop the Steal who might not even believe in Stop the Steal, and or people who were pushing Russiagate who might not believe in Russiagate.
You know they knew in their hearts it was Chris Hayes. You're fucking smarter than that.
Yes.
And we all know it.
Yeah.
We all know it, dude.
Right.
And same with a lot of people on Fox who went along with Stop the Steal, or a lot of people on Newsmax. I know some of these. I came up with them. I know they know that they're wrong.
Well, and there were, I can promise you, a lot of people in cable news who, I mean, Hillary Clinton's flaws were obvious for all. And I mean, one of the things, that I did towards the end of my tenure at MSNBC was deliver a monologue about, like, my God, please don't, this is going to be a disaster. Like, you're wildly out of touch with this moment. You sat on the board of Walmart, your husband did NAFTA, like all this stuff, TPP gold standard. It was not groundbreaking to say, but no one would say it.
But it was on MSNBC.
It was
That's
on,
the point.
No one would say it because
you took the blinders off.
Yeah, and the problem and the access journalism thing comes in, and I've told this story plenty of times before, but for people who don't know it, the president of the network got a call from Hillary's camp, apparently.
Oh my God.
And they're like,
Is this public? Is this public knowledge yet or no?
Yeah, I've talked about this before.
No scoops. No scoops
No,
today.
I didn't. No, I didn't know if it was new for everybody. I didn't know if it was like already news.
Right. So anyway, I get a message from the president of the network that's like, we're not trying to curtail your coverage. You can say whatever you want about Hillary Clinton, but you have to approve it with us
Oh, that is trying to curtail your coverage, literally.
Yeah,
You're just asking questions.
That's
and it works.
bullshit.
Yeah,
right?
and it
Of
works.
course
And
it works.
look, I'm a human being. Did I think next time I did other stuff on her, but next time around was it like
You thought twice.
Is this really worth it? Like I'm gonna have to go through this.
It's
and
your
it's gonna be under
livelihood.
scrutiny, all
Gross
that
system.
stuff. Yeah.
Gross.
So that's really the way that works. So to your question about how do you fight that those normal human instincts, because that's what we're talking about is normal human. This isn't
Yes.
like you're directly corrupt, but of course you're influenced by what people want to hear and what the incentive structure is. I actually think the subscription model helps to ameliorate that because you have more of a stable base. People have bought into you. They've invested in whatever direction you're going to come in. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is that we really are very proud of having a very ideologically diverse audience. And I think it's pretty rare. I don't want to say it's unique, but I
would
think
say it's very rare.
I think it's
in
pretty
politics,
rare.
it's incredibly
And
rare.
even though, like, you in particular, because they didn't expect
Yeah.
me to be on board with Stop the Steal, but even though you pissed them off, like the right-wingers off with Stop the Steal, we still have right-wingers who watch and
they still
appreciate
watch
our
it.
content. We have neoliberal. I mean, we trash neoliberalism every day, and we have neoliberals who still
My favorite fan
watch and appreciate
interaction
it.
is the guys in suits who come up to me, man, I love your show. I'm like, oh, what do you do? Like, I'm a lawyer at Chevron.
Oh.
And I'm like, wait.
No. But what's interesting is that, and I mentioned this the other day in a different context. I think in terms of actual regular people out there, regular Americans, there are examples of populist right people who, voted for Obama twice and then flipped to Trump.
Of course.
And
people know this
or
in their normal lives.
People,
Yeah.
like you've always said, union people in Kentucky who are in a union, they're left on virtually every economic question, but they're socially conservative and they're pro-gun and they're anti-abortion and they're whatever. Now, funny enough, I really don't think there's any actual representatives of the populist right in D.C.
Not
at all.
That's
Not
correct.
even the poster boy who was against $15 minimum wage, Josh Hawley, right? So, but what's interesting is that people probably feel like you give a voice to that, the actual populist right, not the fake populist right.
Yeah, I mean, here's the other thing, too. I don't even look at myself as a spokesman for a lot of these people because that's when you start to go down the train of, well,
What
I
do they
gotta
want
play
me to
the- what-
say?
and
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I get a lot of pushback from a lot of folks all the time. Oh, well, if you need to understand this dynamic. I'm like, oh, I do. I just don't care. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't have
Would you
your,
even consider yourself that then or no?
well,
Populist
I don't
right?
know.
or no?
I would
You just
consider
don't know?
myself. I will always believe in populist politics. Putting right and left now, post January 6th, made it just me. I believe I'm politically homeless. Like, I would call myself like a radical centrist or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Don't
Like,
do
what does
that.
that even
Saagar,
mean?
don't do that
No,
ever.
but radical centrism.
We're kicking him off the set.
Because what have we
I'm
discussed
joking
on the
with you.
show how many times? What is actual centrism?
It's the center of
right?
the country.
What is
Yeah.
actual centrism? Like, who represents somebody in South Texas? I actually heard from some of these types of people who said they played my videos to shut up one of their screaming sisters because they voted for Trump. Who represents somebody who is in South Texas, who is third generation, fully Latino, pro Medicare for all, pro life, pro $15 minimum wage, who voted for Trump because they despise people in Washington and New York who speak down for them? Who represents that person? That's a lot of people, millions of people. They're left out of our political system. I don't know what that is. I mean, you can describe it whatever you want. The radical centrist thing has been tried many times. Maybe I'm trying to reclaim the label, but this just goes to the whole point of trying to label this is just so stupid. How many people believe in Stop the Steal? 31% of Americans, lightly, right? If you press them, 31%. The people who will go along with it just because they're socially conservative, like 40 something?
Yeah.
How many people are diehard Democratic partisans? I'm sorry. There's just not
Well,
that
quick
many
thing
people.
on this. I mean, because Krystal, I'm glad you brought up the access part because once again, we're talking about the more meta part of journalism here. Say we want about CNN. politicians, people in power, they care what they say. Like if
Yep.
you're
They absolutely
if you're that Exxon person, you care if there's a story on
Wall Street Journal,
Wall Street Journal,
you have to read
CNN,
it.
etc. So even though the business model is dying, even though no one here is subscribing to cable, that still matters. So how do you all think about your ability to impact the discourse, you two as well, Kyle, coming from YouTube? Because I think there's a danger in we got a great business model, you're making money, but no one actually cares. And I think if you get, because dude, I get access to the realignment email, obviously.
Totally.
We get so much email from people saying, hey, like, elevate this. I need this to be heard. How do you balance that thing?
This is actually one of
Thought
the
about this a lot.
Yeah, and this is one of the risks I think of going independent, because just because we have that like the Hill stamp, it has given us more of a foot in both worlds than I think if we had started independent.
Yeah, I don't have a foot in both worlds.
And
Right.
so, and also the fact, we both come from like traditional journalism backgrounds,
I was
et cetera,
a White
et cetera.
House correspondent. She was on MSNBC.
That helps as well,
Right.
and the look and the feel of it, that someone can come in your studio and there's a green
Mm-hmm.
room, and we used to have a makeup artist before COVID. She was amazing. Rhonda, I love
the
you.
best. We miss you.
Rhonda.
We
Yeah,
miss you.
one of the most
Yeah.
amazing women on the planet.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's one of the things that one of the goals with Breaking Points and keeping some of the mainstream look. It's going to be a little edgier than Rising was. It's going to be a little more casual than Rising was. But one of the goals is to try to maintain some of that foot in both worlds. And, in a way, that's not necessarily totally up to us. It's going to be partly a function of the way that this ecosystem evolves, and whether any sort of mainstream politicians realize the fact that these spaces are increasingly important and influential.
One quick follow-up. How is it going to be edgier? Because once again, I'm a little too deep in the DC
Dude, I'm
bubble.
here. That alone makes it edgier.
Yeah.
Well, because like already, I'm like, Rising was already crazy.
Yeah.
So like, what does edgier mean? Like, I think that's amazing.
So I think for one thing, just in the format of the show, and you guys will see this when you see the first episode of the show, like Rising was very much based on a sort of cable news format.
We should explain that, like blocks.
Yeah,
and
so
how
it's like,
that all works.
here's all the
Yeah.
blocks,
Right.
right?
See,
Here's
It's
the A
soulless,
block,
ladies and
here's
gentlemen.
the-
It is very
where
soulless.
are you after this, right? And I mean,
right.
part of
I
that
always hated that, just so
comes
everyone
from
knows.
that's the way that I came up, so that's still a little bit of a comfort zone for me. This is going to be a little more conversational,
Yes.
a little bit less of that, like, here I am as an anchor woman.
You're dropping all the
know?
bullshit. That's the bottom line.
Yeah,
You're dropping
and
all the unnecessary formatting.
But,
Yeah.
We
but some of it
also-
is key, though. That's
Yeah.
what I want to make sure. Like, the production value is key.
Is up, right,
The
yeah.
production value,
Cameras.
the camera, right. Like, we have a multicam system here. We have a switcher. We have, so TriCaster. Like, all these things do matter. So it's not that stuff doesn't matter. But do people really need it? More Rising for you after
this.
I hated saying that so much. Or like these like pre-written introductions, which were long, and they would include videos. The thing that drove me the most crazy is when we would have to play videos back to someone, like have them react to a video of themselves. I'm like, this is not natural,
Yeah.
right? Like, and it's because maybe it's because I'm young, but like, before I got on Rogan, many years ago, I used to listen to Joe Rogan. That is my meat. Like, I much prefer that format. I've been listening to these guys for years, Sam Harris and all these other people, like the way that they interview. That is what I prefer. And so what we always wanted was to split the difference of Rising and that. This is going to be, I would say, in that format, 3/4 traditional, 1/4 like maybe a little bit more non-traditional. This will be a true split the difference.
Yeah,
in
well,
my
I mean,
opinion.
and also let's get the big thing out of the way. You don't have a boss anymore.
Actually, I want to
No
go
more
back
boss.
to the I want to go back to the access question because this is very important, guys. When we're actually independent, we don't have to worry about. For example, sometimes I would talk shit about an ex-politician. An ex-politician would call the Hill and say, "How dare so and so say this?" Now I'm okay. I'm not going to name any names because I explicitly agreed to off
You
the
know what
record.
you know what my follow-up question was.
Who?
People very high up in Congress would throw shit fits about the things that I would say, and they know exactly who to call. They never call you. They always call your boss's boss's boss, and they're going to politely threaten and say, "We're not going to do an interview with your correspondent anymore. You think that we're going to..." And look, in a way, I don't blame him. That's the Hill's job.
I blame
right?
him.
The Hill's job
I
is
blame
to
him a
crawl
lot.
the Hill and to go into, talk to politicians and get quotes and do the Washington story of the day. But I can't, in good conscience, say that I didn't have to at least think about it whenever I criticize
And
somebody.
I also would say, on the other end of that, we've had some fairly radical people on Rising, and I think we would be able to do that more with
more
breaking
funky
points
academic.
because there were yeah, exactly. I'm 100% thinking of Iremy, who
we all knew what
we
you were
love.
thinking.
Yeah,
And
I love that guy.
there have been every time we have him on, we have to hold our breath a little bit that he's not going to say something that's gonna
And I
that the
don't
Hill is
want
just
to.
gonna be totally like not okay
Not
with.
what we signed up for.
And we don't want to have to even have those thoughts
don't even wanna
in
think
our
about it.
head,
Yeah.
right? Because we are human beings and we are all subject to the incentive structures and pressures. And so maybe not you, because you seem to be like,
No, it's
you
that
seem
the
to be
incentive-
separate and apart.
you got-
from
you
all
gotta-
of
Incentive
you gotta
these.
structure
know
lined
that.
up. It's not I'm immune to incentive
I was
structure.
gonna
It
say,
lined up.
Your
Yeah.
incentive structure lined up for you, but any normal human feels this whenever they have that. And so when you have a boss and you have somebody who's calling somebody, I'll give you another example, which was TikTok, which is that I did a whole expose on the Washington slime who are all going and working as lobbyists for TikTok. And those people are very well paid and very well connected, and they threw a shit fit and accused me of spawning death threats and all these other things
Oh my
before
God.
them. Yeah.
I don't even think
screw
I
you,
knew
by
that.
the way. And yes, and you think they called me? Nope. Went all the way up to the bottom. How dare he? This,
Wow.
and this. And look, to be fair, they had my back. But that was basically like a Chinese lobbying effort in order to shut me up. It's in the back of my head. Also, at the time, I remember I was not very happy about this. I can finally speak out about it. The Hill was taking advertising dollars from Huawei, which I was also not happy about. So I know they're taking Chinese telecom money. I'm like, if you know what the TikTok real move would have been, buy some ad space on the Hill, right? What the fuck am I gonna do?
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah, I just want to take an opportunity because I think you're giving like an anti-pitch. You're saying like, hey, like politicians, people in power, you don't want to engage. But here's the thing. I think people should engage with you.
No,
because
we want them to.
so let's say what's about you give a pitch though,
Right.
because there's a real audience of real people who are into this. Like, how many people are hitting you up saying, "Hey, Saagar, could you get me on Rogan? I have a politician book that he would hate, but like, let's do it." Like, that's a hint to everyone. It's probably not going to work out. But
if
like,
you listen to this, stop asking me.
Why should traditional politicians engage with this new format as it's becoming clear that the people that they need are not there? Andrew Yang may become mayor of New York despite all the debates we can have about what's happening right now because he resonated with these real audiences.
That's
So
it.
what is the pitch?
You just made the pitch.
you just made
I
the
mean,
pitch.
that's it right there.
Look at Trump. Trump brought out people who hadn't voted in 30 years in order to come to the polls. That's
He went on
politics
Alex
now.
Jones' show. I
That's
forgot
right,
about
he did.
that.
And you know what?
He went
That was
on
probably
Alex
the right
Jones.
move.
That's so funny.
For all of these
I
people,
hear great things about you,
Right.
wonderful man.
I'm not necessarily talking about a primary, but if you want to reach young people who actually trust Krystal and I in order to deliver them the news, then you need to come here. You can think that they don't vote. They just voted at the highest level in modern American history in the 2020 election. And if you want, in order to look good on Twitter, which these people are so venal, like they have so much vanity that like if they had people like tweeting about them in a nice way, they'd be so
well,
happy.
Tell your
That's what
story
they want.
about Ro Khanna and how
Yeah.
he says that, like he goes on cable news. And
Oh
gets
yeah.
you get
zero
nothing.
interaction.
Yeah,
Zero.
Ro Khanna said
Right.
that he would go on MSNBC, CNN, all these different big news shows, and he would get zero engagement after that. And every time he went on a lefty YouTube show, his Twitter would light up.
Yeah, man.
With people. Yeah,
I
so there's a
heard
real
that.
audience versus a fake audience.
I heard that from people all the time, panelists who are like, dude, what have you guys built over here? You're like, I do a show on MSNBC and nobody gives a shit. I go on your show, I get like 90 Instagram followers and people get mad about what you say.
It's
and like,
meritocracy versus anti-meritocracy in a way, because they have to give you the platform in mainstream media. They have to decide we're the gatekeepers and we're gonna let you in. But like, they don't have good judgment. What the fuck do they know?
Right.
So what it really is in new media and independent media is it's a real free market. It's a real meritocracy. Can you rise to the top of that?
There's also a true intentionality. Something I really realized very early on is, okay, you may get a little bit less viewers. In the beginning, we were getting less viewers than people who were on cable. But They were with us. They're locked in. They
Yeah.
intentionally
They're
chose to watch
actually
your video.
listening.
They
Yeah.
put your headphones in. People have sent me photos of people watching us on the subway.
Yeah,
Like people who
it's intimate. Yeah.
downloaded that video are sitting there watching us.
Right.
They're What do you do when you watch cable? It's on in the background.
It's on
at
at
a
an
dentist's
airport
office
or a salon.
Or at an airport.
Right.
Even at home, when
Yeah.
my parents watch cable, they're not watching.
Yeah.
It. They're like cooking, doing
What does
something
Brian
else.
Stelter have to say?
Or
Right.
like if they see a segment, if they see a headline, which then you click the volume, right? But it's not an intentional experience. YouTube is highly intentional, and that relationship is where 2 years ago this was nothing. We couldn't have the ability to go independent. We had no
Yeah.
audience. Now people come up to us on the street. Some guy left a note in my mailbox saying
Yeah.
thank you. Recently,
I
being
got
like,
Mr. Kalinsky in the street, which is
Mr.
always
yeah,
adorable.
right. Well, thank you. You've meant so much to me. Can can we talk on the phone or something? And all of that. That doesn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like it's a true connection
There
that
are
you have with people.
very few. I mean, probably we've been thinking about this. Probably the only two cable news hosts that have a real following.
That's right.
Are
Yeah.
Maddow and Tucker.
They're the only
Those are
ones.
the only
Yeah.
two I
And they're
think.
A+ in terms
Who-
of pure
Yeah.
talent.
And amazing content, both of them. That's
Right.
obviously a joke, guys.
Regardless of how you feel about it, you watch these people.
They
Russia
are
Gate
very
or
good.
culture
They
war
are very
shit.
good at giving their people exactly what they
Yeah,
Right.
Russiagate and
Right.
culture war
Yeah.
shit.
Right. So,
That's what people want.
but yeah, I mean, this was the big thing that I noticed coming from cable news is like, holy shit, people actually are listening, and you can make a nuanced argument and they follow it. And in fact, sometimes they notice too many things. They'll notice like,
Yeah, no, they
your
want
mug
you to-
was turned a different way, or
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
what was up with your earrings, or
Or they
whatever.
want you to have more nuance. Give me
I-
another layer of nuance.
But I love all of that. And so back to your question, Marshall, about like, what is the pitch? I mean, that level of intimate engagement with an audience is, I mean, you can't beat that. You can't get that anywhere else. Chuck Rocha would talk about we
At
would
the
have him
Bernie
on
campaign.
all the time to update us on the Bernie campaign and their efforts at Latino outreach in particular. And he would call me and be like, I'm at this rally and everyone, like, they all know who I am. They're, we saw you on Rising. We saw you on Rising. He's done cable news for literally
Yeah.
decades.
Yeah.
And this has not happened before, but you get that like direct connect with someone in a way that just is not the case in a lot of other formats.
But let's also be clear. Now you need the support of the people. Now you
Yeah,
need
we do.
people to sign up, people
Yes.
to watch the
We
show.
are putting our faith in the people very much.
We had to. At the end of the day, that's the best model. It always will be. And look, I'm not saying we're ruling out advertising or whatever, but like we need to see how much we can do this. Just purely support it.
Said it's the
Yeah,
base. Right?
so-
If you have the base, then you could have a different.
But let's be clear. So
Yeah.
you'll never ever read an ad,
Well,
right?
I don't know. Look,
Don't
I'm
make
not
that-
gonna
don't-
rule it
don't
out.
make that
Okay.
Look,
commitment.
I don't want to make that commitment. What if it's for Liquid Death, which I really
We love
okay,
Liquid
okay,
Death.
okay.
By the way,
Liquid
guys,
Death.
just so you know,
Love
that's
Liquid
seltzer.
Death.
That's
Yeah.
seltzer. So
Liquid
he's
Death
trying
in
to steal
here.
my beat, which is
That's
the
true.
seltzer beat. I'm
Yeah.
the seltzer man.
I've got seltzer in here. I've got seltzer
fair.
in here.
That's a fair critique.
Right
It
now.
is,
Look,
yeah.
I'm not going to rule it out, but
Okay.
from the very beginning, I want to build this. I want this to be as supported by subscribers as humanly possible.
How about this? How about this? You'll never, unless you believe in the product,
Yeah.
you'll never sell.
Let me tell my
By the
favorite
way,
ad
that's
story.
already.
By the way, that's not a given. You have no idea. The majority of
Yeah.
people will sell shit
Oh,
they
for
don't
sure.
use
They
or
do not
believe
believe
in,
in.
which drives me
Saagar, this
fucking
is
crazy.
This is the best ad story because people try to use it as a dunk, and you couldn't say, no, I don't agree with this. Remember when like the Cokes like sponsored the Hill? People would be like, well, Mr. Populist Saagar, what do you say to this?
By the way, I didn't know that, and now you're both kicked out.
That's what I wanted to say, and I wanted to say fuck you to them for a long time because they've been going around town talking shit, and they don't think that
Well,
I don't hear about it.
That actually was a real
Yeah.
problem though,
That
because
sucked.
they took there was also the American Petroleum Institute. They
What?
gave money to the Hill,
Oh,
and I
yeah,
saw
yeah.
someone randomly on my Twitter feed who was like, "Oh, I see now that like since the Hill took money from API, Krystal hasn't covered what's going on with Steven Donziger." Well, we had Donziger booked for that week. We were covering the
Right.
story, but I hate that there's
was the
even.
story?
He's
Steven Zonger, the Chevron lawyer.
Okay.
We had him
yeah,
on the
I
show.
mean, they've
Right.
had him on house arrest.
It was
It's
horrible. Right.
insane story. You'd
Right.
be really interested in it. And total like kangaroo court. This guy who is all he's accused of is a misdemeanor, which he didn't even commit, has been on house arrest for over 2 years because Chevron is mad at him that he won a settlement against them in South America. So important story. But the fact I didn't even know that there was money with API involved at the Hill, and the fact that there's a what is a legitimate question in
Yeah.
people's minds over whether that's impacting our coverage, I absolutely hate. So that's something that I am very glad to be done with. And on the positive, the sort of like prospective pitch, look, we want to be on the level with, influential in a way that CNN and MSNBC and Fox News are. We want to have a space where people can continue to share clips because they look mainstream but don't sound mainstream. And so that's really, that's what we are relying on people to help us build. And I would be lying if I didn't say I was scared of shit. It's very nervous.
Scary. They're both nervous. It's adorable.
Yeah, we're very nervous because look, we had a good gig.
It was a great gig.
We loved
they wanted us to stay.
We love doing Rising. We love what we built.
Yeah.
I started doing YouTube full time in 2012, 2013, and it just worked. And you guys are already a proven product in that even when you are at a corporation with all those negative influences, with a fucking boss, you still manage to maintain a degree of integrity. And so now that you're totally unchained and nobody's above you, I mean, people already love the product and now they're going to love it even more. And I think there's no way it doesn't succeed. Even if the YouTube algorithm fucks you. YouTube algorithm fucks me all the time. I'm still here, bitch. What? Even for them, just support them, and I guarantee you it's going to take off. Don't be nervous. It's funny because they're nervous for themselves, and I'm like, why are you fucking nervous? It's going to be fine.
Well, we've got bills to pay, so that's
we all have bills.
So here's the big question then. Going back to something you said earlier, Krystal, you said there were basically 3 eras of Rising.
Yeah.
The one that is just imprinted into my mind was really that Bernie's doing really well.
Yeah, the primary.
You think
Trump
that is the book came out. What would you all say is like the story? So it's no longer like the rise of populism. Like, so because for good or for ill, like that quite isn't it right now. Moving into June, moving into July, like what is like the narrative? Because I think the part that's resonated with people so much is just that narrative idea. I mean, this is what we do with the realignment. This is what you guys are doing, Krystal. Like, what is the narrative right now?
I think it's about these massive, just following these massive tectonic shifts.
Acknowledging it, because people feel crazy. They're like, I can't buy a house. Why can't I buy a house? I don't understand. I went to the bank. I worked my ass off. I have a down payment. And some guy in BlackRock is paying cash? Why? How did this happen? I did what I was supposed to do. I took out debt for when I was 19 years old in order to pay for college, and I was promised a good life. And now I don't know what to do. I feel I'm upset. I cry all the time. I can't get married. My girlfriend wants me to propose to her, or my boyfriend, or whatever, and I can't do that. I can't have a child because I can't afford childcare. I can't have a child because I can't afford to stay home. I mean, I can endlessly knock off the lists of things that people experience, especially in our lives, and nobody talks to them. Nobody is even like, I see you, man. That sucks. And here's exactly why it sucks. And here, maybe, is something that you could do about it. Maybe not, sometimes we don't have the solution. It's not our job, necessarily. But we want to speak to what they feel every single day, and nobody talks to them.
In the context of America, it's very counterculture to say, this is not all your fault.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very counterculture to say, like,
individualism.
Right. You're struggling. You're in a job that you hate. You're not making enough money. Like, you don't feel like you have any path to a future that's just stable and that has meaning in it. And you know what? Number one, you're not alone. And number two, it's not your fucking fault. And that, I would say, is kind of the narrative. And look, we tease that out in a lot of ways, just looking through the lens of whatever those store, whether it's GameStop or whether it's, this insane housing market right now, like all these different pieces that are going on help to stitch together that picture of, look, that's not to deny people like agency and personal responsibility, but it's actually very counterculture when you have the whole like idea of the American dream and the bootstraps and the meritocracy to expose how much of a lie, an insidious, destructive lie that really is.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking to that, I remember we were doing a live show, I think in New York, and I said, how many people here have student debt that they can't afford? And it was like 3/4 of the room. 3/4. And it was stunning, right? I mean, like, so many people. And in terms of what we get the biggest response, that's why I think the housing stuff works. That's why I think a lot of the media stuff works. People know they're being lied to, or at the very least that there are obfuscations being made, but they don't know why. They don't have the experience to tell you exactly why. Or even in the White House press corps, everyone knows that the coverage is different. I was a White House correspondent. I can explain it to you, and I have many. I've been like, this is how it actually works. This is what the background is work. If this were the Trump administration, here's what they have done. This is what I used to do, and here's what they do now. And here's why that's structurally, at least, pretty corrupt in the way that you're going to cover at least this particular policy. People know that it's wrong about why we have troops in Afghanistan, but they can't tell you why, and it's not their fault. They should live their lives. They should be happy. Fortunately, I got bit by the political bug real early, and we take it a real responsibility on ourselves to research exactly what's happening. I mean, every minute of the show takes like 20 minutes of preparation, of just like, of reading and making. We picked every single topic. We wrote every single headline, even though I know some of you hated them. Remember, our job was to get clicks. I'm sorry. Things will change.
Our headlines
okay.
were amazing.
Our headlines
There
are
were
pretty
some,
good.
there were some cringe-ass headlines there.
I know. I am going to be honest. I'm proud of every single one we wrote, and we used to laugh so
I have
hard
to
whenever
say,
we write them.
like,
Yeah.
I do think in general, right-wingers are a lot better at headlines than left-wingers. So the fact that, I really think the
Right.
fact that you had a right-wing background
That's
helped
true.
us a
My
lot in the
tabloid shit.
headline creation department.
It's a fair point.
Yeah.
As two left-wing headline
Thank you,
writers.
Daily Caller.
Thank you, everyone at the caller. Jeff Ingersoll, I'll shout him out. He taught me, the very first thing he taught me to do was write a headline. Very first thing. My first day as a journalist.
I'll give my rules of thumb are
Right.
short,
Right.
punchy,
That's right.
and something in caps.
Tell the whole story.
Something in caps.
Yeah.
The real thing is tell the whole story.
Yeah, right.
Say it in
So
less than 100
I always give
characters.
it away.
That's really hard.
In the
actually.
headline, I'm just like, this
And you
is the
should.
thing. If you don't want to watch the video, fine, but
You're-
here's the thing.
You're
Clickbait is
really good at them too, though.
So.
Curiosity gaps don't work. Like, here's
Yeah.
what you need to know.
Yeah, it's just gotta be like,
Except
this is
when
the
they
thing.
do. See, that's the thing. They don't
Ooh,
work
that's woke.
except when they do. For example, like, if it's a big, expansive idea, like infrastructure package, you can't explain everything you need to know.
Yeah,
about
it's not
infrastructure.
possible.
But
Right.
if we do a whole 19-minute segment on infrastructure, we can be like, here is everything you need
You
to know.
know,
about infrastructure.
that is true,
Yeah.
actually. You have to have a feel for sometimes if it's like a big topic everybody's talking about, or if there was like a debate,
Yes, I
then
did
people
one.
will want just like winners and losers, or here's
Facts
what
and
you need to
fiction.
know,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever.
I
Like
did-
facts and fiction is another
To
one.
that point, one of the broad ones I did is Kyle responds to criticism.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
No, it's
and
good.
that worked. But
Yeah.
usually you're right.
Well,
As a general rule of thumb, you want to
You
give
can
it away.
only do
Something
that.
specific,
You can
yeah.
do that because people trust you. So once people trust you, you can get away with a ton more. But when you're trying to build an audience in the beginning, then you have to be super direct, super straightforward. This is where news writing
And
comes
over
into
the
play.
top.
We've kind of danced around it, so
Yeah.
let's just be direct. How many times a week is the show going to come out, and how long are segments? Because I think this is the thing that's changing a bit.
Yeah, so it's going to be 3 days a week. Tentative schedule right now is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. The segments are going to be as long as they need to be. And what I mean by that is I have no idea. If it is a monumental day in history of American politics, one segment could take an hour and 10 minutes. If it is a short story, which we just want to highlight for somebody, it can be 6 minutes. Because guess what? We don't care about hitting 8 minutes. You know why we had to care about hitting 8 minutes? Because then you get 2 ad breaks, and the amount of revenue that you get from YouTube increases. I don't give a shit anymore. It can be as long as it needs to be. This is what I mean in terms of the consumer is not at the heart of most content which is being produced today. Cable news is not about informing you. It is about filling airtime in between breaks and keeping your eyes glued. Rush Limbaugh once admitted his job was not to inform people, it was to keep people so ginned up that they stayed throughout the ads. That's why he died worth $500 million. Now, same with YouTube. I mean, the truth is that YouTube, if you just make your money just on that, then you need to be all about ads. You need to be all about. I once listened to a thing about how Mr. Beast obsesses around thumbnails. I'm like, man, I don't need that.
Mr.
life.
Who?
Mr. Beast. He's one of
The
he's like the most
Like one of
popular
the biggest YouTubers.
Yeah,
Totally sounds like a porn star.
you should actually watch some of his videos. They're pretty good. But
He's interesting,
yeah,
actually.
Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
But my main point is I don't need that. You know, like I don't want to be
Sounds
spending there.
terrible.
Yeah, being like tweak the lighting. I'm like, no. Our job is to tell people what we think is important. They have imbued us with the trust to say that we trust you to curate what you think is important for me. That's the relationship. It will be however long it needs to be. That's it. I have no idea how long.
The last thing that I want to say, which I think has been really important on Rising, which I know has been really important, Kyle, for your success, and which, of course, we're going to bring to Breaking Points as well, is just like, we don't do partisan cheerleading.
No.
We don't carry water for any politician, even ones that we like. I mean, it's really just a commitment to, we're going to fuck things up. Of course we're going to
Yes.
get things wrong.
We'll get things wrong.
We're going to, like, screw
What a great
things
pitch
up,
this is.
but-
I'm gonna fuck it up, but support me.
Support us anyway. No, but we're gonna do our best to be honest, and that's really the core of the pitch. And it's something that no one, not a soul on cable news, can say to you.
tell everybody where they could find you. This is all the most
Right.
important stuff.
Yeah.
So KrystalandSaagar.com. When this airs, it will be. You can go ahead. It's our Supercast landing page. You can hit subscribe. You can go ahead and sign up there. The moment you hit subscribe, you'll get access to the private podcast feed. I'll have your email. Then, not in a creepy way. We'll have it. We'll have your email so that we can send you
I know
all
where
of
you
the
are.
unlisted links so that you can watch everything without ads. And look, here's the other fun part. Let's just explain this. We had these bullshit clauses around how we couldn't promote our own podcasts,
Right.
even though.
Don't get me started on this, Saagar.
Which we're
I
sitting
will
on-
not stop.
yeah.
What influenced you?
But think about this. Like, these people didn't understand YouTube, which was that, like, YouTube is all additive, as in there were a lot of stuff that we explored on Rising I didn't necessarily have the time to do, or that Krystal wasn't necessarily interested in. That's okay, because Marshall and I had the realignment. Krystal probably had some progressives that she wanted to talk to for a much longer period, debate or whatever. All good. That's why you guys have Krystal, Kyle, and friends. It's a funnel. It's like a flywheel. You find Rising,
Symbiotic.
you like this, then you go to that.
Yeah.
And they had these insane rules around, like, oh, you can't promote that. I don't even know if I ever acknowledged that you and I were co-hosts. Whenever
Never.
you were
By the
panels.
way,
you weren't
you
even
would always
allowed
be
to
a
say-
homie and say, yeah,
guys,
Marshall,
have
you're
you noticed
co-host.
anybody missing? Have you noticed anybody missing from appearances on Rising for the past however
Well,
long?
like, it's been a
Yeah.
year. Yeah, it
Kyle,
was crazy.
Once Kyle and I started our podcast together, he became banned for
I was
insane reasons.
banned from Rising, even
Listen.
though it would have helped them and helped us. And also, she couldn't mention our podcast, Krystal, Kyle, and Friends, on Rising.
And no, sometimes
So-
we would do this thing where we'd be like, I was recently speaking with this person, and it's like, well, where were you speaking
Yeah,
to that
like,
person? Chris would be like,
somewhere else.
I just had this interview. I think we had an interview with Joe Scarborough. I really wanted to mention it,
a
and
great
I
effing
couldn't do
interview.
it. And I
why,
was like,
why would you interview Joe Scarborough?
Oh, no,
You should
no.
listen to
We
it.
have,
It
we
actually
have,
was
we have
Yeah.
to defend him on this.
Yeah.
He is the most self-aware Beltway person ever. We were like, look, Joe, like, we have to ask you these questions because our audience kind of hates you.
Yeah, I was
he goes, bring him on, just do it. And
He was like,
I
oh, you
respect
hate
it.
me? He's like, you hate me?
It's like-
Yeah, and I was like, wow, man, that's money will do that to you. But
Smug
look,
prick.
Joe,
That's all
I
I
will,
have
at
to
least,
say.
I will at least give it. He'd actually love to talk to you. I'm serious. Like, no,
I
no
wouldn't.
joke.
I wouldn't love to talk to him.
I think
so
you would, because
Sorry,
he's
Joe, it's not happening.
much more self-aware than you would think, at least in a podcast
I'm
format.
just gonna keep my mouth shut
yeah,
on this
yes,
one.
please
Look,
do.
all of
You
that
guys
being
can
said-
have him again on the realignment.
See,
We're
this is
all
why
set on the
we
Jim
have.
probably will.
This is why we have different. This is actually the
Yeah,
beauty of it. We have different shows.
I believe
that
in
have the same-
dialogue, except with Joe Scarborough.
Here's the deal. It didn't make any sense. We are all have. We have the beauty of Rising, which brought people in. We have different intellectual interests. All good. It all comes together, right? And yet, this was never understood. So that's going to be another awesome part of it. Your guys' clips will be on the Breaking Point channel. Same with the realignment clips. It'll all be like a symbiotic relationship because that's the way it should have been from the very beginning, which is that, like, people cared about Krystal and me. They obviously cared about you guys. Your audience helped build our damn channel in the first place. Realignment has done very well because of Rising, and now, like, people actually realize that, like, oh, it's not some, like, weird Chinese firewall thing in between it. I just think that the key point is collaboration in this new sphere is so important, and that this zero-sum mindset of old media, like, how many times do we want to have somebody on, but they couldn't because their contract said they're a
Right.
cable news commentator. They're like, oh, well, CNN doesn't want to have me on. Or
Silly.
MSNBC says I can't do it. Why? I mean, I guarantee you, no offense, but, like, a shit ton more people watch our show than your show.
Can I name a name real quick?
Oh, sure. I don't even remember.
The
I don't even
Washington
know.
Examiner.
Oh, right.
Like the peak of,
Oh,
like,
yeah, they're really
because we used to
weird
CNN
about
and
it.
MSNBC.
I'm going to call them out directly
I'm like,
because this
what?
was always so stupid, which is that their editorial policy was that I'm guaranteeing that they're not going to come on anymore. But whatever.
Oh no.
Which is that their editorial policy was that the Washington Examiner and the Hill are competitors. Therefore, all of my friends who worked at the Washington Examiner were not allowed to come on the show as guests, even though Hill TV is totally separate from the Hill.
It's just
and it was like,
silly.
what? Like, and I'm like, so we once led the show with a Washington Examiner article, and I told my friend, I was like, dude, we literally led our show with it. Like, in what world? Like, how is this not just like free promotion for you? Which it was, right? Like, how many other people would have found out about it? And he was like, yeah, they just won't listen, man. It's that zero-sum mindset is all across Washington. It's all just like knife fighting, and like my scoop comes at the expense of your scoop, or like
Well, that's
my
actually kind of
interview.
semi-true,
No,
at
no,
least
that
in
is
that
true.
case.
But I'm saying in the interview space, they don't understand that it doesn't apply anymore. Which is that my interview with so and so, let's say this has happened to me so many. How many times have you heard somebody maybe in a short form format, and you're like, man, I need to learn more about this guy, and so you start searching, and you go watch a longer interview of that person. I've done that a million times, and that's exactly what we need to have in this new ecosystem. Not just us. It's like Glenn and Matt and so many others. It's like there's no reason that we should be pitted against each other necessarily. That's the antithesis of how it all should be, and that's not how we all think in real life. Like all the problems I have with corporate media is just fundamentally dehumanizing. All of it is dehumanizing. It's like all about competition. It's about demonizing the other side. Then you start to make money, so people get okay with it. You're like, okay, well, cash is nice. Like, I'm sure Chris Hayes is a nice house. Like all these other people, but in their hearts, like they know it's wrong. And the whole point is, how do you align the incentive away from having to do that?
How do you realign the
Ooh, see, that's how we did it. And I can't do a sucker. But with this quick, because I want to put like some meat on the bones of what this could really look like. I remember when y'all did like the Populist Guide to 2020 like book tour, and we did a realignment episode, and you guys just pulled a clip of it for your actual rising. You guys talked about the clip.
About that.
We got 300K views on that video because people said, hey, like, I saw this good 5-minute clip of them. Let's listen to the full hour
watch the whole thing.
And once again, that's an example of everyone won.
Yeah.
Everyone. This is good.
However, there's one exception to this with the zero-sum mindset. Barry Weiss. Krystal and I are trying to defeat Barry Weiss, so go subscribe on Substack to Krystal Kyle and Friends.
Yes, indeed.
Is this the rankings?
Yes. If we don't get in front of her,
it's really
there's
sad.
problems.
Kyle
on the show.
is
we should not.
Yeah, that's
how about that? How about let's not do that?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think the bottom line is we're very nervous. We're very, very excited. We are experiencing a real sense of freedom and expansiveness of what we're going to be able to do and be able to bring to you guys, and we are ultimately putting our faith in you.
That's exactly right.
Super excited to be partnered with Supercast. Their technology, I think, is really cool. They're part of sort of, making it possible for us to provide some of the services that we are. And if you go to KrystalAndSaagar.com, that's where you can sign up for all the good stuff.
That's right. We'll see you guys. We are so pumped in order to get started. We've got an awesome set, which you designed little knickknacks and tchotchkes, which we've been curating in order to put
tchotchkes.
On the. Heard that Marshall actually came up with that one. I don't know where he came.
Which one is it?
You said you're the one who said tchotchkes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're at a conference. They have like little things.
Been scouring Etsy. Got some cool stuff in order to put the background. As we said, first 1,000 people to subscribe, we will give you guys an exclusive behind-the-scenes walkthrough. You can meet the new team. You can see exactly what it's going to be like. You're going to get a lot of other content there. I cannot wait to get excited, and I also cannot wait to pass some guy who works at CNN or MSNBC or whatever on the street and just be like, "Sup, dude? Yeah, we're beating you now."
Well,
this is the new world.
I definitely wish you guys luck. I think it's going to be a massive success.
Thank you,
and
Kyle.
As long as you have the people backing you, then it's all going to work out. And I think you guys have that.
Appreciate that, man.
You got it.
Thanks to both of you. Thanks, Marshall, for you guys have been a huge support, both of you, and the many late night phone calls. We were afraid. We didn't know what to do. I mean, there was a lot of emotion that led up to this moment, and it's amazing to finally be sitting here.
One day the full story will be told.
One day I will tell that full story.
All right.
All right.
High blood pressure.
Love you guys. Okay. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
KrystalAndSaagar.com. Krystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. Realignment on YouTube. Do it all, and we will see you guys soon.